Hi, I'm Sarah, and during this course we developed or designed an application called Politico. And before we go into talking about the process and the design, I want to say a little story. So during one of my internships, I was working and there had just been an election and everyone was talking about who they voted for. And so the conversation was around the fact that everybody there had voted conservative and nobody understood why anybody would vote anything but conservative. So I was staying quiet because that's not who I had voted for, and one of the senior managers realized that I was staying quiet and asked, well, who are the young folks voting for these days? Like, who did you vote for? And I thought about lying and saying that I had also voted conservative, but I decided to stay true to my vote, and I told them that I had voted liberal. And there was absolute silence. And then I was being bombarded with questions like, how could you vote liberal? What about the taxes? How about the education? What about this? What about that? And I was feeling very overwhelmed because I couldn't really defend why I voted liberal, and it was kind of embarrassing. So I went home that day, I did some research, I spoke to some friends, and I realized that we're all kind of in the same boat where some of us don't actually vote, but the ones that do don't really know why we're voting for who we're voting for. And so when we took this course and we had the opportunity to pick a topic for a project, we decided that we wanted to explore this gap between politics and young voters. And so that was what inspired us to pick this problem space.
So let's talk about the process that we took to come to our solution. We started off with our research phase, followed by the definition phase, and we finalized it with our prototyping phase. Now just keep in mind that this was a very iterative process, but for the time limitations, we're going to focus on certain parts of this. So to start off with, the research phase includes 3 things that we did. Initially, the group of 5 split into individual. We went individually to choose literature reviews to review, and then we came back together as a team to really discover the findings and to bring together whatever we discovered to find the problem space that we were looking into, which was the gap between young voters and politics. And once we kind of really found whatever we were looking for in terms of our problem space, we did further research to really understand what problem we wanted to really solve. To do so, we did 3 things. We started with surveys, and we surveyed 40 young voters from the ages of 18 to 24. We then followed that with interviews of 8 young voters as well as politicians. And lastly, we did a focus group that included 5 young voters, also aged 18 to 24. From our research, we then came back as a team and we really dug deep and came up with 3 main findings that really helped us to get to our solution. Our first finding was that young voters are politically illiterate, young voters gather their information from social media, and lastly, young voters are afraid to share their political ideas with others.
So after our user research, we also identified 2 personas, and we will bring these to life a little bit later into the presentation. We then moved into the define phase of the project, and here we established the design principles that we wanted to adhere to. We developed requirements based on our research to meet the user needs for the system, and we identified success measures for our application. And the goal was to develop a platform where 18 to 24-year-olds can be engaged in politics. It's an area where they can learn and get information about politics, but also we wanted to build a community where there is open discussion about politics, where you're not feeling judged and you can have these conversations. So we moved into the prototyping phase, and here we started with our low fidelity prototypes. So here, our group of 5, we diverged. We each created our own low fidelity prototypes. We usability tested them with like 5 users, and then we converged again. We brought our findings and we developed one high fidelity prototype based on what we learned from our low fidelity prototypes. Now that high fidelity prototype that we came up with was far from perfect. So from there we did a heuristic evaluation and we iterated our design, and we found a lot of things that conflicted some of the principles that Jacob Nielsen had introduced. We also did a cognitive walkthrough and we found some gaps in the flow of our application. And then we pilot tested our high fidelity prototype, and again, we found some more gaps. And we were finally ready to take this application that we built to our users and do like another round of usability testing, and that was conducted with 10 users. And our findings were that the users loved it. They loved the idea of this application that we will talk about soon, and there's nothing like it out there.
So before we jump into anything further, as we mentioned before, that we really wanted to get into the personas that we had developed. So instead of just talking about it, why don't I just introduce you to one of the personas? So with a round of applause, can I introduce you guys to Political Priyanka?
Hi everyone, I'm a third-year political science student at Ryerson, and I have an avid interest in politics. I love politics. I talk about politics, I go to political events, I read about politics. I know everything you need to know about politics, what goes on in the news, everything. And I love to talk about politics. Now, that's one of the challenging things about being somebody like me who loves politics, is I either feel like I'm shoving politics down people's throat and maybe they're calling me Political Priyanka behind my back, or I feel like I'm being judged. I feel like there aren't platforms out there where I can talk openly without being judged. Things like Facebook and Instagram. If I write something there, I don't know, I don't really think that I want people to see that side of me, and I really I'm so scared of being judged, and so it's really hard to discuss politics openly. But not everybody loves politics like I do, so I want you to meet my friend, Engineering Emma.
Hi everyone, I'm Emma. Sorry I don't look as good as Priyanka over here. That's because I'm a first-year industrial engineering student here at U of T, and I don't really have the time to do anything. The time I have, though, is to study, and do some more studying. When it comes to politics, the word politics really freaks me out. I get really overwhelmed because right when I get into this topic, there's just a lot going on, and I just want to stay away from it altogether. So
then how do you vote? Like, who do you vote for?
I usually just vote for who my parents vote for.
Oh my god, we need to talk. That is completely unacceptable.
Yeah, we can discuss that later. But what I'm really here for is to talk about Politico and why it works for me. So I want to really talk about the headlines page, which is one of my favorite pages. As you can see over here, Politico really offers you a summary of the political events that are going on in your area. So a student like me who doesn't really have the time to go on Google and really search and go into articles specifically, I can now go onto the main headlines page and really find out what's even going on very concisely. Not only that, I can also start an article. What that does for me is that if I'm reading something and I don't have the time to finish that article, I can always start it and come back to it, or I can just save it as a favorite article to come back to later. Now, if I go onto a specific article itself, it's not just a normal news app where I just read it and I move on. What Politico really offers you is different perspectives. So as you see, CTV News tells me all about Trudeau planning higher carbon taxes. Now what Politico offers is if I click on the green button right over here and press the global news arrow, I now know what global news will have to say. And that offers me various perspectives, so I don't have to just go with what one news source is saying.
So what I really like is the events page, because sometimes it's really hard to figure out when these political events are happening. So on the events page, it's kind of like an Instagram for politics. It's absolutely fantastic. So at the top there are stories. So if you're ever not able to attend a political event, you can see what is going on over there. But since I attend all political events, I can actually add to these stories. I can share pictures and videos of what I'm seeing so that all of you can see what I'm also seeing. I can also figure out more information about upcoming events. So if I look into an upcoming event that I'm interested in, like a debate, I can figure out when it's happening, where it's happening, the address, the description. I can add it to my calendar. I can even visit their website. And it just makes it so easy for me to find out about political events, but also to attend them in the future. But then there's also the discussions page, and this is what really speaks to somebody like me. So here I can look into some conversations that are happening. I can contribute to these conversations, and if there are discussions that are not there, I can create my own threads, and I will definitely be creating a lot of threads on Politico.
Now, not all of us have time to discuss politics. A lot of us don't even know where to get started. So the cool thing that Politico offers is just where to start, which is the learnings page. So as you can see here, Politico offers you two options when it comes to learning. You can start off with learning about your political identity, as well as you can learn about the politicians. To start off with the political identity feature, you are directed towards a quiz where after answering a bunch of questions, it takes you to your results page. Now, instead of just choosing a party that you resonate with the most, it really tells you where you lie on the political spectrum, which is really good for an engineering student like me, because I don't want something chosen for me without a description or a reason. It really tells me where I lie on the political spectrum, and I can really choose which party I resonate with the most, and go on from there as a starting point. Now, as I mentioned, it also tells you about the politicians. After figuring out your political identity further, it's very important to learn about politicians. Even when I mentioned before that I just vote for who my parents vote for, I can finally really go and learn about the political leaders that are in my area and make a really wise decision. So after clicking on the politicians page, I have a list of all the politicians that are in my area, and I can click on each one of them to learn more about them and what they're advocating for. So now I can make a really good decision next time I'm voting.
So we've definitely used other applications before to learn about politics, but what stands out about Politico is compared to something like Google News, I don't have that discussion ability that I have in Politico. And so I have to go to some other app to do that.
Yeah, and I've used Vote Compass before, and it tells you where you lie on the political spectrum. However, it doesn't tell you what to do next or where you can go for further research.
So then you have to go to another app. It's like iCitizen, where you don't get that events information like you do in Politico. And so we find that Politico really works for both of us, even though we have very different personalities, and it is the full solution to addressing this gap between politics and young voters.
And that concludes our presentation. We're welcome for any questions.